Here's a wild fact. When researchers told people to sit in a room doing nothing for 15 minutes, most of them chose to give themselves painful electric shocks instead. Actual physical pain, just to avoid being bored. And honestly, I get it, because I would have pressed that button too. But here's the thing. While we're all desperately avoiding boredom like it's some kind of disease, we might actually be destroying something crucial in our brains. Harvard professor Arthur Brooks says that our addiction to never being bored is literally making us depressed, and the science behind this is genuinely fascinating. So today, we're diving into why boredom might be the most underrated superpower you're ignoring. And trust me, by the end of this video, you might actually want to delete a few apps. Let's go back to that experiment for a second, because it's honestly insane. Harvard psychologist Dan Gilbert put people in an empty room with literally nothing to do except sit with their thoughts. The only object in the room, a button that would give them an electric shock. These weren't mild shocks either. They were painful enough that people said they'd pay money to avoid them. But after just a few minutes of being alone with their thoughts, a majority of participants shocked themselves anyway. Think about that. We find our own minds so uncomfortable that we'd rather experience physical pain than spend time with our thoughts. That's not normal. That's actually terrifying. But why? What makes boredom so unbearable that we'll do anything, including scrolling through the same 3 apps for the 100th time today, just to avoid it? The answer lies in something called the default mode network. And no, that's not some sci-fi concept. It's an actual system in your brain that activates when you're not focused on anything specific. Here's how it works. When you're busy scrolling, working, or watching videos like this one, your brain is in task mode. But the moment you stop, when you forget your phone and you're just sitting at a red light or lying in bed before sleep, that's when the default mode network kicks in. And this is where things get uncomfortable, because your default mode network doesn't let you just zone out peacefully. Instead, it forces you to think about the big stuff, the meaning of your life, your relationships, your purpose, those existential questions you've been successfully avoiding by watching TikToks at 2 a.m. Your brain literally starts asking, what does my life actually mean? And most of us are like, nope, not today, and immediately grab our phones. But here's the plot twist. That discomfort, that's not a bug, it's a feature. Brooks argues that we need boredom precisely because it's uncomfortable. Those big questions your brain forces you to confront, they're essential for understanding what actually matters to you. Think about it. When was the last time you had a genuinely original thought? Not something you read in a comment section or heard in a podcast, but an actual idea that came from your own brain during a quiet moment. For most of us, it's been a while, and that's the problem. We've essentially figured out how to completely shut off the default mode network. Every time we feel even slightly bored, waiting in line, sitting on the toilet, walking to our car, we pull out our phones. We've gamified the elimination of boredom. And according to the research, this is contributing to an explosion of depression and anxiety. Because here's the thing, you can't find meaning in your life if you never give your brain space to look for it. Brooks puts it perfectly. It's a doom loop of meaning. The more you avoid boredom by grabbing your phone, the harder it becomes to understand what your life is actually about. And that emptiness, that sense of hollowness, that's where depression lives. So what do we actually do about this? Brooks has some surprisingly simple protocols that he follows himself. First, no devices after 7 p.m. Second, never sleep with your phone in the bedroom. Third, absolutely no phones during meals, because you should be present with the people who are actually there, not the ones who aren't. And fourth, regular phone fasts, just periods where you completely disconnect. He's honest about it too. At first, it feels like children screaming in your head. That's the dopamine addiction talking. But then it calms down and you actually feel better. And here's where it gets really interesting. When you practice being bored, you don't just find more meaning. You actually become less bored with everything else in your life. Your job becomes more interesting. Your relationships become richer. The world around you becomes more engaging. It's like your brain's tolerance for ordinary life increases when you're not constantly flooding it with infinite scroll and algorithmic dopamine hits. Plus, you start having your best ideas again. Brooks suggests trying just one workout without headphones, without podcasts, without anything, just you and your thoughts, and he promises you'll have some of your most interesting ideas in months. Look, I know what you're thinking, but what if there's an emergency? Here's the thing, whatever's happening on Twitter is not an emergency. The news can wait. Your grandparents didn't know what was happening in Washington, D.C. every single second, and they survived. So here's the challenge. Try 15 minutes of real boredom tomorrow. No phone at the gym. Commute in silence. Sit with your coffee and just think. It's going to be uncomfortable. Your brain is going to scream for stimulation. But that discomfort, that's where the good stuff is hiding. Because maybe, just maybe, being a little more bored is exactly what we need to be a little less depressed.